Rain slithered down the windshield like melting glass as Arman squinted through the wipers, navigating the narrow, dimly lit lane. The world outside was soaked in gray. It was nearing 11 p.m., and the storm had refused to ease. Potholes filled, with muddy water reflected broken streetlights. Most shops had shut hours ago, and only the occasional flicker of a TV screen behind curtained windows reminded him people still lived here. Arman, barely 21, pulled his delivery scooter to a halt and checked the address on his phone one more time. House number 47, end of Maple Lane. He rubbed his hands together for warmth and adjusted the hood of his thin rain jacket. His clothes clung to his back, damp from a dozen earlier stops. This one, he noticed, was the last delivery on his list. A small smile flickered on his tired face. He parked the scooter by the iron gate, its paint chipped and flowers long dead in the soil bed beside it. The house ahead looked old but carefully maintained. A single porch light glowed a warm yellow, casting long shadows across the wet front steps. As he approached, the wooden door creaked open before he could knock. Standing in the doorway was an elderly woman, wrapped in a mustard-colored shawl. Her silver hair was neatly tied in a bun, and her thin frame carried itself with quiet dignity. Deep lines etched her face, not just from age, but something heavier. Time, perhaps, or memory. "You're late," she said softly, not with irritation, but with something gentler. Concern, maybe. "The rain must have been bad." Arman nodded. "I'm really sorry, ma'am. The road near the canal was flooded. Took a long detour." "No need to explain. Come in, child. You're soaked." "Oh, I'm okay," Arman replied instinctively, polite. "Here's your order. 1 vegetable soup, brown bread, and a bottle of water." She reached for the bag, her fingers brushing his. They were cold. He noticed her hands trembled slightly. "Do you work late often?" she asked, holding the bag but not moving from the doorway. "Almost every night," he said, smiling. "Helps me cover my college fees. And my mother depends on me." She looked at him then, not just at his face but through it, as if she recognized something familiar beneath the soaked jacket and tired smile. A moment of silence passed between them, filled only by the soft drumming of rain on the awning. "You—" "No," she began, hesitant but sincere. "It's quite late at night. Why don't you stay here? Just for a little while. I live alone too, and I get scared sometimes." Arman blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. "I'll make tea," she added quickly, almost apologetically. "And you can dry your jacket. I'm sorry if that sounded strange." It did sound strange, but something about her voice, its fragility, its honesty, made him pause. He glanced back at his scooter, then at the rain still pouring in sheets. And slowly, he stepped inside. The inside of the house smelled faintly of jasmine and old books. A small lamp in the corner cast a soft golden light across the modest living room. Floral curtains swayed slightly in the breeze from an open window, letting in the rhythmic sound of rainfall. Arman stood by the entrance, careful not to drip water on the carpet. "You'll catch your death like that," Mrs. Fareeda said, walking over with a towel in her hand. "Here, dry your hair." Arman hesitated but took it. "Thank you. I really didn't mean to bother you. I know it's late." "Nonsense," she replied, waving her hand. "You're not bothering me at all. In fact, it's nice to have company for a change." Her voice had a peculiar tone, gentle, inviting, yet touched by something that made Arman feel both welcome and wary. He looked around. The house was neat, filled with old wooden furniture, family photos, and a large grandfather clock ticking steadily by the wall. There was warmth here, but also silence. The kind of silence that had settled into a home long after its last guest had left. "Would you like some tea?" she asked, already heading to the kitchen. Arman smiled politely. "Sure, if it's not too much trouble." She turned back, her expression soft. "Trouble? No, child. Trouble is when the kettle refuses to whistle, not when someone accepts a bit of kindness." He chuckled. "That's a nice way to put it." As she busied herself in the kitchen, Arman took a seat on the edge of the old sofa. His phone buzzed, with a message from his mother. "Reached home yet?" He typed a quick reply. "Delayed. Delivering last order. Almost done." He hesitated to mention where he was. A few minutes later, Mrs. Fareeda returned with a small tray, 2 ceramic cups, steam rising from both. She handed him one and sat in the armchair across from him, her shawl drawn tighter around her shoulders. "It's cardamom tea. My late husband used to say it chases away the cold." Arman nodded after a sip. "It really does. This is amazing." They talked idly for a while, about the storm, the flooded streets, how deliveries were tougher in winter. Arman mentioned he was studying part-time and working full shifts to help his mother. "She raised me and my younger sister alone," he explained. "My father passed away when I was 10, so I do what I can." "You're a good son," she said almost wistfully. There was a pause. She looked at the photo frame on the side table. A much younger version of her smiled back, standing next to a tall man and a little boy, perhaps 6 years old. The boy had a toy plane in his hand. Arman followed her gaze but said nothing. "And your children?" he asked gently. She didn't respond right away. Her fingers curled around her teacup. "Gone," she said at last. "One passed long ago. The other drifted away. Life has a way of carrying people off." "I'm sorry." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's all right. I've made peace with it. Some days are just longer than others." The clock struck midnight with a deep, resonant chime. Arman stood slowly. "I should get going. My mom must be waiting." He reached for his helmet, which he'd left by the door. She stood too, but her eyes lingered on him a moment longer than necessary. "It's quite late at night," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Why don't you stay here? Just for tonight. I live alone too, and I get scared sometimes." The words hung in the air, gentle yet unsettling. Arman turned toward her. I don't know. It's kind of unusual, isn't it?" she offered, a light chuckle masking her vulnerability. "It is, but you're a decent boy and it's raining hard. I have a guest room. You'll be safe." He hesitated. His instincts told him to leave, to say thank you and go. But something else, something softer, made him pause. Maybe it was the storm outside. Maybe it was the quiet pain in her voice. Or maybe deep down, he recognized that look in her eyes. The quiet ache of someone simply needing not to be alone. He nodded slowly. All right. Just for tonight. Arman sat on the edge of the guest bed, phone in hand, staring at the faded wallpaper. The room smelled faintly of rose-scented talcum and something older, wood polish, and quiet history. A single dim lamp illuminated the corner, casting shadows on the ivory curtains. The storm still raged outside, a distant thunder rolling across the sky like a drumbeat. He hesitated before calling. His mother answered on the second ring, her voice groggy. Arman? Is everything okay? Yeah, Amma. I'm fine, There's this woman, an old lady. Last delivery of the night, she asked me to stay. Said she's alone and scared. The weather's still bad, and honestly, I don't think I can drive back safely in this rain. A long pause followed. You're staying at a stranger's house? She seems kind. Harmless. Feels like she just needs someone around just for tonight. Another pause, this time tinged with worry. Then, okay, but send me the location. And message me if anything feels wrong, all right? I promise. He hung up and placed the phone on the side table. For a moment he just sat there, listening to the ticking of a clock somewhere in the hall. It was odd, being in someone else's home like this. But there was something about this house, about her, that didn't feel threatening. Just empty. As he stood to take a better look around, he noticed the room's shelves lined with photo frames. In one, a much younger Mrs. Fareeda beamed in a bright red sari, a garland around her neck, standing beside a tall, mustached man. They looked happy, newly married maybe. Another photo showed her cradling a baby, her eyes full of pride. A third had that same boy, perhaps age 10, holding up a trophy, his grin wide and confident. There was a fourth photo, older, worn at the edges. It was the boy again, but this time he was a teenager, scowling at the camera mid-step as if trying to walk away. That photo had a different energy. Fractured. Those were better days, came her voice from the hallway. Arman turned, slightly startled. She stood at the door with 2 mugs of warm milk. I figured tea would be too much this late, she said with a smile, stepping inside. He took the mug with a polite nod. Your family? Yes. She sat down on a cushioned chair near the window. That was my husband Yusuf, school principal, very strict, very proper. The boy is our son Samir. Arman glanced again at the photos. He doesn't live here anymore? No, she replied softly, staring into her cup. He left nearly 20 years ago. Said I was smothering him. He was right in a way. I always worried too much. Called too often, gave advice no one wanted. He said he needed space, and then he never came back. Arman felt a knot form in his chest. Did you ever try to reach out? She nodded. Many times. Letters, calls, even visited his old address once. But people disappear in more ways than one. You can know someone your whole life and still lose them. They sat in silence for a moment, broken only by the occasional crack of thunder. "I didn't mean to make you stay," she said suddenly, as if realizing how strange her request had been. "You just reminded me of how it felt to have someone in the house again, to hear a voice other than mine." "It's okay," Arman replied gently. "Honestly, I don't mind." She smiled at him, this time with something deeper. Not gratitude, not relief. Something closer to recognition. As if for the first time in a very long time, she was not just being heard, but seen. "I used to love rainy nights," she said, turning toward the window. "Yusuf and I would sit on this porch with warm blankets and radio songs playing low. Samir would dance in the rain until he was soaked. We used to laugh so much, the kind of laughter that fills a house." "And now?" Arman asked quietly. "Now," she whispered, "I wait for the kettle to whistle just to break the silence." Arman looked at her and nodded slowly. He didn't know what to say, but he understood. Sometimes silence didn't just fill a home. It buried it. The clock's soft ticking was the only sound in the room. Arman lay on the guest bed staring at the ceiling, shadows dancing as tree branches outside swayed in the storm's wind. Despite his exhaustion, sleep wouldn't come. Thoughts swirled. His mother, the rain, the strange warmth of this house, and the woman who lived in it alone. A gentle knock on the door broke the silence. He sat up. "Yes?" The door opened slightly. Mrs. Fareeda peeked in, her shawl drawn tight around her thin shoulders. "Still awake?" "Yeah," he said, swinging his legs over the edge of the bed. "Can't sleep." "Me neither," she smiled faintly. "Would you mind some tea?" "Real tea this time." He chuckled. "I'd like that." They returned to the living room, the soft lamp still glowing as if it too had chosen not to rest tonight. The air smelled of cardamom and clove. They sat across from each other, cups in hand, quiet for a moment. "It's funny," she said, looking into her tea, "how silence becomes a habit. At first it aches, then it just is." Arman nodded. "I get that. At home, it's different. There's noise. My mom's always fussing about the bills or the gas running out. But when I'm alone, I feel it too." She looked up. "You live with your mother?" "Yes, just me, Amma, and my little sister. My dad passed when I was 10. He was a rickshaw driver, hit by a drunk car driver on his way home. Since then, it's been us three." Her eyes softened. "That must have been hard." He shrugged, though his voice thinned. "I guess. I grew up fast. Started working part-time by 16. Full-time, after college classes now. It's exhausting, but I don't want Amma to carry everything alone." "And your dreams?" He hesitated. "I want to start a small business one day. Maybe a mobile repair shop or delivery service. Something that's mine. But right now every rupee goes to bills, rent, school fees for my sister." Mrs. Fareeda listened closely, eyes never leaving his face. "You remind me of Samir," she said quietly. "He was always dreaming big. Wanted to go abroad, start something on his own. But I think I held on too tight. Maybe that's why he left. Arman frowned. You were just being a mother. She smiled sadly. Sometimes love makes us selfish. He looked at her then, not as a stranger, not as a customer, but as someone who'd carried love and loss in her bones for years. Her pain felt familiar, like a mirror to his own mother's worries. She reached over and touched his hand gently. You're a good boy, Arman. The world needs more of you. He felt something shift, small but real. A warmth in his chest, not from the tea but from her words. Thank you, he said softly, for the tea, and for this. For the company, she corrected, smiling. It's been a long time since this house had a heartbeat at night. They sat together. In the quiet, two souls, both weathered by different storms, finding calm, if only for a moment, in each other. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world washed and quiet. Pale sunlight peeked through the misty windows as Arman woke to the soft chirping of birds and the scent of freshly boiled tea. He stretched, then stood, rubbing the back of his neck, still processing the strange comfort of the night before. As he stepped into the hallway, barefoot and cautious, he found himself drawn to the stillness of the house in daylight. It looked different now, less mysterious, more lived in. Dust particles danced in the sunbeams. A ticking clock echoed faintly from the drawing room. He wandered gently, careful not to invade, but curious. Along the hallway, family photos lined the walls. Weddings, picnics, birthday cakes. One photograph showed a young boy, Samir, holding up a drawing, stick figures beneath a rainbow. Me and Mama, it said in large, childish scrawl. As he walked further, Arman noticed a door at the end of the hallway. It stood out immediately. Unlike the others, this one had something taped to it. Crayon drawings, old and fading. A stick, figure family, a house, a kite, and a sun with a crooked smile. The paper was curling at the edges. He reached for the doorknob. It didn't turn. Locked. Just then, a soft voice behind him broke the silence. That room is private. He turned. Mrs. Fareeda stood there, holding a tray with 2 cups of tea, her expression unreadable but unmistakably guarded. I'm sorry, Arman said quickly, stepping back. I didn't mean to pry. I just saw the drawings. Her eyes stayed fixed on the door. That was my son's room. Arman nodded slowly. She walked forward, setting the tray down on a side table, and then reached out to touch the edge of one of the drawings, her fingers trembling. He left when he was just 17, she said, voice low, distant. It was the last time that door was opened. Arman waited. He said I was suffocating him, that I didn't trust him, that I didn't see him for who he was. She paused, swallowing hard. But I did see him. I just wanted to keep him safe. The world is cruel. A mother sees what a boy can't. She turned to Arman, eyes glistening now. I called him too much. I made him check in every hour. I never let him go on trips with friends. I kept a curfew like he was still 10. Her voice cracked. And he hated me for it. Arman remained quiet, unsure whether to speak or listen. Mrs. Fareeda exhaled shakily, pressing a hand to her chest. I kept his room exactly as it was. His books, his toys, even his slippers by the bed. Locked it one night and never opened it again, as if keeping it untouched might somehow keep him close. She tried to continue, but the words failed her. Her body shook as she covered her face with her hands. Arman stepped forward instinctively and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. "I think he knew you loved him," he said softly. "Even if he couldn't handle it then. Maybe he just didn't know how to deal with his own pain." She looked up at him, tears streaking down her wrinkled cheeks. "What if he never forgives me?" "Then you still forgive yourself," Arman whispered. "You did what you thought was right. That's all a parent can do." She broke down then, not in violent sobs, but in a slow, quiet unraveling, the kind that comes after years of holding too much inside. And Arman stood there, no longer a delivery boy in a stranger's house, but a witness to a mother's unspoken grief. By late morning, the sun had fully risen, casting golden streaks across the tiled floor. The air was crisp, birds chirping brightly, as if the long, stormy night had never happened. Arman stood by the doorway, backpack slung over his shoulder. He turned to Mrs. Fareeda, who held out a small tiffin box wrapped in a cloth. "I packed some lunch for you," she said with a gentle smile. "It's just a aloo paratha and achar, still warm." Arman blinked, surprised. "Auntie, that's too kind. You really didn't have to." She pressed it into his hands. "And I added a little something for your sister, too." He hesitated. "At least let me pay for the delivery. The app still shows the bill." She raised a hand firmly, shaking her head. "No. You gave me something far more valuable than food last night." He fell silent, understanding the weight of her words. They stepped outside. The sun glinted off rain-damp leaves, the street glistening with puddles. For a moment, they simply stood there, reluctant to end the strange comfort that had grown between them. "Thank you," Arman said finally, "for the tea and for everything else." She smiled warmly. "Thank you, Beta, for listening, for staying." He nodded, then turned, walking toward his bike. She stood by the gate watching him as if trying to memorize the way he looked in the light, but it wasn't the end. That weekend he dropped by again, this time without a delivery order. Just a short visit, a knock on the door, a smile, a cup of tea, and then again the next week. Sometimes he brought his sister along. Sometimes he stayed and helped her fix small things around the house. Sometimes they just talked about nothing and everything. Politics, old movies, the rising price of onions. No dramatic declarations, no promises, just a quiet presence that began to fill the empty spaces. Slowly, their bond became something else. Not just a young man and an old woman who shared a stormy night, but something softer, like family, chosen not by blood, but by kindness. And, for the first time in years, Mrs. Fareeda began to leave the porch light on, not out of fear, but in hope. It started with a call from the neighbor. Mrs. Fareeda had fainted in her garden alone. Arman rushed to the hospital, his heart pounding as he sped through traffic. When he arrived, he found her in a hospital bed, pale but conscious. an IV drip running beside her. Her shawl was folded neatly on the chair, her eyes heavy with fatigue. She smiled faintly when she saw him. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I did," Arman said, gently squeezing her hand. "Why wouldn't I?" the nurse informed him. It was mild dehydration and low blood pressure. She hadn't been eating well, hadn't left the house in days. The stress had finally caught up with her. He stayed with her that whole day, bringing her food, helping with the paperwork, and gently scolding her like a concerned son. The hospital staff asked if she had any immediate family. She gave them her son's old number. They called, left messages. No one came. By the second evening, she turned her head toward Arman as he adjusted her blanket. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but her words were firm. "Arman, if I had a son again." She paused, her eyes moist. "I'd want him to be like you." Arman felt his chest tighten. He sat beside her, silent for a long moment. "You do," he said quietly, placing his hand over hers. "You already do." Her fingers curled around his, weak but full of warmth. In that stark, sterile hospital room, something unspoken passed between them. No legal ties, no formal bond. Just a shared truth. Sometimes the deepest families are formed by choice, not blood. As she closed her eyes to rest, Arman stayed by her side, holding her hand, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because in her loneliness he had found a place where he mattered, and in his quiet loyalty she had found the son she had lost, and found again, in the most unexpected way. A week after her release from the hospital, the sun shone gently on Mrs. Fareeda's porch. She sat in her usual chair, a warm shawl around her shoulders, and a small box on the table beside her. Arman arrived as he always did, carrying groceries and smiling. She welcomed him with tea, and they sat in the quiet comfort of people who no longer needed to fill silences. But today, her eyes held a different weight, something prepared, settled. "I have something for you," she said, reaching for the box. "Please open it when you get home." He looked at her curiously, but she shook her head. "Not now. Later." That evening, back in his small home, Arman sat at his desk, the box before him. Inside he found 2 envelopes, one sealed in plain paper, the other marked with a lawyer's stamp. He opened the personal letter first. "Dear Arman, I never thought I would find peace this late in life. I believed my days would end quietly in silence and regret. But then one night a boy with kind eyes and soaked shoes knocked on my door, and everything changed. You gave me more than your time. You gave me dignity. You saw me, not as a strange old woman, but as someone worth knowing, worth caring for. That alone would have been enough. But you stayed. You listened. You gave this house laughter again. This home is yours now if you want it. Not out of pity, not out of debt, but because family is something we build. I never thought I'd have another chance at that. The legal documents are enclosed. Please don't feel burdened. If you choose not to accept, I will understand completely. I've chosen to move to a care facility. It's my decision. I don't want to be a weight on you. But know this, wherever I go, You will always be my son in every way that matters. With love and pride, Fareeda. Arman sat still for a long time, the letter trembling slightly in his hands. The second envelope confirmed it all: a modest inheritance, ownership of the house, and her final wishes. He visited her the next day. She was already packed, sitting in a wheelchair, her eyes bright but tired. "You read it?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes." "And?" He crouched beside her, placing the letter back into her hand gently. "It's not about the house, Auntie. It's about you. You're not going anywhere I won't follow." She smiled then, truly smiled. And so, even as she moved into the care facility, Arman visited weekly. Sometimes he brought his sister. Sometimes he just brought stories. And though time passed, what they built never faded. A lost mother. A searching son. Two lives that had nearly slipped into silence. Now forever intertwined. A year had passed since Mrs. Fareeda moved into the care facility, and life had shifted in ways neither of them could have predicted. On a bright morning, the small sign above the modest storefront caught the sunlight. Fareeda's porch. It was a cozy little cafe combined with a delivery hub. Arman's dream realized, painted in soft pastels, with hanging flower pots swaying gently in the breeze. Inside, the walls were adorned with photographs, candid shots of Mrs. Fareeda and Arman laughing over cups of tea, snapshots of their small garden, and even a framed picture of the old wooden porch she once sat on. Mrs. Fareeda was there too, her silver hair neatly pinned back, wearing a simple apron dusted with soil from the flower pots she'd helped tend. She moved slowly but smiled widely as she arranged fresh blooms on each table. Arman wiped down the counter, glancing up with a grin. "You're doing a better job with the flowers than I ever could." She chuckled softly. "I might be old, but I still have some tricks." Customers came and went, but the cafe held a peaceful warmth. A place not just for food and drink, but for stories, comfort, and unexpected family. Later, as the afternoon light softened, Arman and Mrs. Fareeda sat side by side on the cafe's small porch, a pot of steaming tea between them. She lifted her cup, eyes twinkling. "You've done well, Beta. This place, it feels like home." Arman smiled, feeling the weight of the journey that had brought them here. From a cold, rainy night to this quiet moment. Her voice softened, almost a whisper, as she looked out at the street. Sometimes the people you never expected become the ones you can't live without. They clinked their cups gently, savoring the tea and the rare peace between them. The porch light flickered on as dusk settled in, a beacon for all the lonely hearts who might still find their way inside. And, in that simple glow, two souls, once strangers, found a new beginning together.